delight to welcome to the studio the Dowager Duchess of Devonshire. Your Grace, good morning to you.
Hello.
Although you have told me to call you Deborah because
That would be better.
less of your grace, she said.
Not too much grace.
Well, no, we'll do a little bit of grace because I feel like I've got value for money. Then that's the thing, you know. and also join us in the is it Seligman your surname? Seligman.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't read the type on this, and half the time they spell it wrong anyway. Simon, a delight to have you on the show as well. Here predominantly to talk about a new exhibition celebrating the life of your late husband.
That's right.
And how did that all come about?
Well, we've been planning it for a long time, but we couldn't do it last year when we should have done it really, because some of his favourite things, works of art and things that he'd bought, were in America on a travelling exhibition which went on for 3 years, so it wasn't well, we couldn't get hold of them. So now he's got all his favourite things there, and it's just lovely.
It's one of my regrets in life that I didn't meet your late husband.
Did you not?
No, never did. And for no other reason than I always wanted to meet a man who'd named a pub named after him. You know, I'd never met anybody who was that important that they'd had a pub named after them, which I thought was pretty special and splendid.
It wasn't exactly him. But
well, there had been about 10 or so that had gone before him. But was the late Duke? Was he a bit of a collector then? Was he? Did he?
Yes, he was.
What kind of things did he?
Well,
like?
he collected art of the sort of art that he loved. A lot of Bloomsbury paintings, those sort of paintings. And then we were lucky enough to get a huge lot. I think he got about 14 by Lucian Freud, who we knew when we were all very young. And now, of course, he's the most famous in the world, I suppose, of his kind, which is a good bit of luck for us because people are really, well, they're very beautiful, but people are very interested in them.
And it's so nice. I mean, it is one thing to have them in a family collection, but it is so nice to be able to share them with people. You're a great one for this, though. You've done exactly the same with the big house, haven't you, of course, with Chatsworth, is that one of your intentions, the both of you, your intention was to make sure that you shared it with people, didn't you?
Well, yes, he was terribly keen on that. He really liked it when there were people around. What he loved was in the summers hearing the children over the wall shouting, yelling, screaming. Didn't have to do anything about it, but he just loved. He just loved hearing them. I don't know why he'd have been if he'd been in charge.
What was it like living in the house? Because I know you. How much of the house did you have? We were having this debate yesterday.
You can't have more than one room with the newspapers and the fire, can you? However big the house is. So you go home into a sort of kennel.
Yeah.
But it was just real luxury because you never had to look at anything ugly.
Yeah.
And there's not many people who can say that.
No.
Either indoors or out, the views are fantastic, and the quality of the things indoors is just superb.
Living in a house like that, does it kind of hark back to days gone by when, the whole of the house would be... it's an immense, huge house,
yes,
isn't it,
immense.
really?
Well, it would have been even longer trips. The luxury of the house I've got now is only 2 steps from the kitchen and 2 more to the garden. And when I lived at Chatsworth, it was an expedition to go to either.
Just to go down to the garden and back.
Yeah.
I'm going to the garden maybe sometime.
Well, it was 34 steps down from my room. But it was beautiful and wonderful. But it was different.
Is it a big adjustment, though, to be able to sort of go to
No, because I knew I was going to do it for some time, and I'm really happy that you can't imagine how nice it is.
Was part of the reason that you've moved from Chatsworth now? Was it part of being
it was
there
time,
on your own, as it were?
It was really time for my son and daughter-in-law to have their turn, I've been there for 50 years, so I've had great luck doing that.
We've been talking about, all this week on BBC Radio Derby and across the BBC, they're talking about death and all the different aspects that we never ever talk about. Yeah. And I just wonder from you losing, you obviously had this wonderful relationship with the late Duke, and I just wonder, have you got any tips for people on how you deal with that? Do you have to deal with it all in your own way, do you, when you lose somebody?
I sometimes wonder how we ever dealt with it. 64 years we've been married, which is sort of unusual now, isn't it? But we were very lucky because we had different interests. We were able to follow our different interests. And I think maybe that's not a bad thing. And he was the most generous nature of anybody I've ever met. And when he got old and ill, and when he started to lose his sight, I never once heard him complain, even to me, which I thought was extraordinary.
Are you fully aware of the way that you're held in very high regard, the both of you are held in very high regard, not only in Derbyshire, but I suspect throughout the entire UK and perhaps the world, everyone who ever met you, because you are just You're just one of these wonderfully unassuming people, aren't you, really? You have all this wealth and you have the title and you have, you know, the wonderful upbringing and all the rest of these wonderful things. But you just love people, don't you?
Well, I think we both do. It was he who was essentially... He was responsible for keeping Chatsworth in his family because just after the war there were huge problems with death duties and all that, and it nearly became a museum, it nearly became Manchester University and so on. But he doggedly held on to it, and then things started to go right. But it was entirely him who did that. Otherwise it would have been obviously a public institution of some sort. They'd have looked after it, but it would have been different.
You know what they say about every great man, though, and I suspect it's true. Simon, let me bring you in at this point. This exhibition is a wonderful opportunity, isn't it, for people to see some great artefacts, isn't it?
It is. It's what's lovely about it is that it covers every aspect of the late Duke's life. So you've got collecting if you're passionate about works of art, but hundreds and hundreds of photographs from the albums, never seen before, from him as a tiny child right through to the end of his life. Wonderful oddities like the Duke's racing silks worn by Lester Piggott when Lester Piggott rode his great racehorse in the 60s.
And Lester comes on the audio, doesn't he?
Yes, there's a lovely audio we've done, which you get when you pay as an adult to see the exhibition. You get a complimentary copy of the audio, and you've got Her Grace and the Duke's children and sisters talking on it, but also people like Lester Piggott.
So rather than just a narrator talking to you and saying, "Oh, you're looking at this and now you're looking at that."
No, it's not what you're looking at. It was really about him.
Yes, so there are lovely stories about him from people who really knew him. Because it's that thing, very often in a historic house, you're making an exhibition about people who, to be frank, have been dead 200 years. And it's not easy to find friends alive and well to talk. But with His Grace, there was a real opportunity to get something that's going to be very valuable for the future as well, but that brings him to life. So you have a lovely sense, hearing Her Grace and many other people who knew him, talking about him, the man, while you're looking at the things that tell you about his life and the things he did and his robes from being the Knight of the Garter or his robes as Chancellor of Manchester University. There's a fly whisk given to him by President Kenyatta when he was a minister in the Foreign Office. Wonderful things from a long life.
It's eclectic, isn't it? I mean, there's no other word for it. I mean,
I suppose he had a bigger sort of canvas, or whatever you'd like to call it, of friends and acquaintances of any human being I've ever met, right across the board, everybody, from the politicians to the people in the street. I mean, he just wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, and was his great secret, I think, from looking at it as an employee, was that he was the same with everybody. He was absolutely consistent. The first time I met him, you and he were walking in the garden, and you introduced me, and I was just a new boy there for a summer to do some car parking, and he lifted his cap to greet me, shook my hand, and you felt he would have said exactly the same if it had been the Prince of Wales or if it had been presidents. It's that great honouring of human beings, and he kept that right through his life.
You must have done well parking the cars then, if you got from that. He must be good, Your Grace.
He was pulling ivy off the walls.
Was he?
I was.
And what did Ivy have to say about that?
Well, I don't know. Now he lectures in San Francisco and New York or wherever.
It's a funny one. Yeah.
You've done all right, haven't you?
Yeah,
the boy done good.
It's wonderful. I've been greatly supported. Yeah.
Do you know? We were just saying that, and I just said, have you any idea, as a couple, how highly respected you are? I've yet, in all the brief time I've spent in Derbyshire, I've yet to hear anybody say, "Oh, I had a bad experience at Chatsworth." Although I have to say, the chocolate cake's very expensive.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
We'll talk about that off air.
That's because it's the best chocolate cake.
It's very, very expensive. I mean, we're talking £8 for 2 coffees and a chocolate cake, and I just think, wow, that's a lot of money.
Is that what it was?
I'm very poor, Your
We'll have to
Grace.
speak about that.
They're not paying you enough already at Derby, that's for sure.
Hey, that's a whole new programme.
Story. Okay.
But no, it's just this kind of, as a couple, and I mean, I know, Your Grace, you were kind of saying, well, look, it's all down to my late husband. It wasn't. It's as a couple. We had, I remember asking somebody, coming from Birmingham, and I asked somebody, I said, why do we have so many royal visits up here? It's so they can have an excuse to come and visit you guys at Chatsworth. It doesn't matter who they are, whether it be royalty or whoever. It's wonderful, wonderful.
There's, I can say this because I know she'll never say it for herself, but what's fascinating is how many people talk about loving Chatsworth. A lot of stately homes, people talk about admiring it or respecting it or enjoying it.
Yeah.
But a real sense of ownership and people feeling, the park is open for free all year round. Lots of people who come never spend any money at Chatsworth. They don't shop, they don't eat, they don't pay to see the house or the garden or the exhibition. But they enjoy 1,000 acres for free all the time.
They're rotters. Is there any way we can tax them?
Probably, yes. It's all right, there'll be a road tax before long. But that real sense that people feel it's their backyard, and that was the atmosphere created by the Duchess and the Duke. And it means working there is great fun because we're all singing from the same song sheet. There's nobody working at Chatsworth, who I know anyway, who doesn't realise that we depend on the visitors, and that's what we're there for. You know, we're there to share it with people.
It's always been open. It's nothing new.
Yeah. Because what I was going to say, the worry is now, though, that now you're not living there, the worry is that it won't be the same atmosphere.
Yeah.
But the legacy has been handed on, hasn't it, really, to your son?
It'll be wonderful. It'll be quite different. But it's wonderful already. There's a lot of changes, and it was high time. More or less every 70 or 80 years there's been big changes there, and they've nearly always been for the better. Yeah. And it's been static now since we had it, since 60 years, so it's really time for a change, and that's what they'll do.
And in a way, the whole history of Chatsworth is actually the history of change. Because the changes are in the past, people think, you know, a place like Chatsworth is formed and then never changes. In fact, as the Duchess says, it's changing all the time, and it's that history of change that makes it so vibrant and exciting. And it's so rare now to find a family-owned place, the family living there, where the new generation, if you like, are as excited about the next 50 years as about the last 450 years.
And you know, it's interesting, the exhibition, and it puts me in mind of the actor Alan Bates. He's recently, with his brother, put on an exhibition in a similar kind of way. All the things that Alan had collected as a young aspiring actor, and you know how he went through his career to have great success, were put on display. And you couldn't help, and I'm guessing this is going to be the same with your exhibition, is that you couldn't help but be overwhelmed and feel so somebody's let you into something very personal.
That's right.
Is that what you've tried to achieve?
I think that's just how it is. He would go into his life. Of course, there were other aspects. He was often very difficult, like everybody is, who isn't. But it's wonderful to be able to see all the different things that he's done, I think.
Was being a Duke something that identified him? Was it an important part of his life? Was it?
I don't think so, not really.
I get the impression it wasn't.
No, I don't think so.
Because he was a younger son, wasn't he?
He never planned. I mean, we were married 3.5 years before my brother-in-law was killed in the war. And he planned, I think, to be a publisher. That's what he'd have loved. Or maybe gone into politics if he'd got an opening somewhere. But he certainly did never expect, and nor, of course, did I, to live there.
Was he close to the brother that he lost in it? Because
Yes,
it was late on. It was
were.
about 44, was it? It was quite late on in the war, wasn't it?
It was 44. He was killed after D-Day, his brother. And Andrew was in Italy at the time, and it was really awful.
Dreadful.
Yeah.
So he's dealing with that loss, and then the realisation that he's now
got to go to heaven. And then, on top of that, his father died only 5 years later when he was only 55. Very unexpected. So that from the age of 30, Andrew had that huge responsibility. And of course, but it wasn't just that he thought about. He was the best company. He was the funniest man. That was one of the wonderful things. And he was so quick. When he stood for Parliament in Chesterfield, of course, without a hope of getting in, it was the best experience we ever had. We were spat at and the car was turned over and all that. It was
What year was that?
Very good for the soul. 45 and 50. He did both, and he was soundly beaten both times. But the point was, what I was going to say, he made the audience laugh so. And in those days, you know, there were huge huge meetings in schoolhouses and all over. Open air as well. And it was a time when they wanted the mines to be nationalised, so you can imagine he hadn't got a chance. And it was just so interesting to watch him with the crowd, who started by thinking he was going to be some stuck-up person that they couldn't bear the sight of, and they ended up by laughing with him.
They
didn't vote for him, of course. But,
but a great stand-up routine, yeah. Why the dalliance with politics? Why did he...
Why did he give up politics?
No, why did he start in the first place?
He was brought up completely in a political atmosphere. His father was a minister. He became a minister himself later on. Was it a
real passion for him?
His mother came from a highly political family. It was absolute passion. That was his first interest.
And he joined the SDP, didn't he? He was the only Duke, because he admired Roy Jenkins and Horsley, so he left the Tory party when the SDP was founded.
But that was very late on.
Yeah.
Until then, he'd been very loyal to the Conservatives, and that's really was his background.
Is there any reflection in the exhibition of his political career?
Yes, wonderful pictures of talking to huge audiences in the Market Square in Chesterfield, that sort of thing.
We were just talking while that record was on about the Kennedys, and you family are quite close to the Kennedys, and you were saying you spent a lot of time in the United States.
Because my brother-in-law Billy, who was killed in 1944, just before he was killed, he married Kathleen Kennedy, who was the next president's sister. And we knew them very well from 1938. I did. I mean, that was years before, because my father had a house right round the corner from theirs in London. And when Joe Kennedy arrived to be ambassador from America in London, it made a real sensation with these 9 children. You can imagine, nothing's ever been seen like it before.
No.
And Kathleen, who they called Kick, who was the one who married Billy, was exactly my contemporary. So we made great friends just from being neighbours in London.
What kind of ambassador was Joe? Did he make his mark, did he?
Well, he was very unpopular because he thought Germany would win the war.
Right.
So it was as easy as that. Once the war began, nobody wanted them anymore.
No, once you said something like that, you kind of...
But they had this fantastic charisma, and Jack Kennedy, the next president's brother, Joe Jr., was one of the best-looking men you could ever imagine. He was in the Air Force, and he was killed on a very dangerous mission, which was full of risk, which he knew, of course. And then Jack himself was greatly charming. And he was one of the only politicians I've ever known who could laugh to himself. He was wonderful like that.
Desperately tragic family, though. I mean, I know it was as time unfolded, but was there ever a perception within the Kennedy family that they realised just how tragic things were panning out for them?
No, absolutely not. It was the other way around. They were full of go and full of enthusiasm for life, and they were the most vital lot. There wasn't one, except the sad eldest daughter, who wasn't quite as others, but the rest were absolutely wonderfully vital. That was their great point.
Did you ever at any point, before, it's interesting, I think somebody in your family said, realise what kind of dynasty they would become?
Well, it's what my mother said. She was watching Jack when he was about 19, I suppose, at a dance in London, and she said to Andrew, my Andrew, mark my words, that boy will be president of the United States one day.
If only she'd have had 5 shillings on it.
I know,
at Ladbrokes.
she dotted not to.
Crazy. What was your upbringing like? Because you're the youngest of the
I'm the
Mitford
youngest
sisters.
of 7. Mm.
And what kind of upbringing? Vibrant, glamorous, it sounds to me.
It was wonderful. I never looked on it as being very glamorous, but people say it was now, so perhaps I better begin to think it was.
But what was it? Because it was kind of normal.
Well, I
for
tell you
was
what,
it?
none of the girls went to school. There were 6 girls. None of us went to school, and that was really not so unusual in those days, which is thought to be very odd now. But I thank God I never had to do exams like these wretched children have to now. I've never been to an exam in my life.
And so your education was formed where? As what? Private tutors or
if
home?
you couldn't call them tutors, we had fairly odd governesses. But it was really nice, I can tell you.
Fairly odd governesses.
Well,
you just need to know more. Tell us more about that.
One was very fond of playing Racing Demon, so we played from 9 till 11:30, and we had half an hour's break, and then we played till lunch.
And that was it. That was your education.
We got awfully good at it.
And then when it came time to leave home or to grow up or to to take some responsibility or do something, did you know what you wanted to do?
No, absolutely not. It's so strange you should have said that. Somebody wrote to me the other day and said, I'm writing round to people who've had interesting lives. She, for some reason, thought I'd had an interesting life. And she said, can you give me a tip for young people as to what they should think about when they're choosing what to do? Well, I wouldn't have had the faintest idea what to do. I wasn't trained for anything. Just lived at home. I could have been a girl groom. That would have been the height. I had no ambition, but that would have been my ambition.
Looking back on, and you have had a glamorous life. I don't care what anybody says.
Had a wonderful
you've
life.
had an incredible
Wonderful
life. Haven't you? Very, very interesting as well. When you look back on it, do you think it was kind of you were almost waiting to meet the late Duke, and then your life kind of?
I don't know. I once went when I was 18. I once went with some girlfriends to a fortune teller in Leicester Square, and she said, "Your marriage will be your life." I always remembered that.
That's incredible.
It was like having a job, I suppose.
Yeah. Did you ever resent any of that? I just wonder whether there was any resentment from your point, because, as I say, there was no suggestion that Andrew was going to become the Duke until he lost his brother in '44. So you kind of like you're just thinking, wow, what have we now sort of?
Well, it's an accepted thing in England, and that's what's kept the houses and the contents of the houses, as far as they go, as they are now. If you go to France, where they had what they call the Code of Napoleon, where everything is divided between all the children, there's nothing left in the houses. Because if there's 2 or 3, they all take their choice and it's gone. And in England, it's very unfair. If you're married to a second son like I was, very unfair. But it works.
Simon, sorry I interrupted you. What are you going to
Well,
say?
no, but I remember the Duchess once saying she could write as a job description housewife, as in married to a great house.
Yeah,
You know,
right.
with
yeah.
the job and with the marriage to the Duke, came this extraordinary responsibility and partnership for a house.
Do you know? And there's part of me that always thinks, and forgive me for saying this, Your Grace, but I just always think, there will be people driving along now listening to the radio. I think they're driving along, thinking, oh yeah, that's a really tough job, isn't it, living in a stately home and all of that kind of thing, without any perception of what is actually required to run a house. And I just wonder whether you feel that kind of, part of your life was robbed by the house and by the estate in a way.
No, it was made by it. I had the best job in the world, just watching other people work.
That is not quite.
No. I think we all know
That's
that.
very good.
We all know that.
Well, it's true, but what makes Chatsworth so wonderful is not only just the beauty of the place and or what we described, but it's the staff.
We talked about Chatsworth. We only mentioned Bolton Abbey as well. I mean, how does that still come under the portfolio and all the
You
rest of it?
don't mention what?
Bolton Abbey.
Bolton Abbey, yes, that is indeed. We used to spend 5 weeks there, and it's beautiful beyond compare, absolutely wonderful. And we have a house in the south of Ireland. I know it all sounds very dotty, but that's how it was.
And the new Duke and Duchess had made their family home at Bolton Abbey, but have now come to live at Chatsworth. But
Are they living at
living at
Chatsworth now,
Chatsworth.
are they?
Moved into the house and are absolutely leading from the front. It's very, very exciting. They're just as passionate as the late Duke and the Duchess.
Do you know, which is great? It's great in a way, isn't it? But I just wonder: have you played a part in that? Do you have to, with your son, to say, look, you do realise one day it's the old cliche, isn't it? One day all this will be yours.
I sometimes say to him, I knew him when you were very young.
But what if he'd have turned around and said, look, I don't really want any of this. I don't want to do this.
He could have, couldn't he?
Yeah. What
But
would
he
you have done? Do you know?
Well, I think you'd be awfully mad if you had that extraordinary opportunity to look after such a place and then just walk away from it.
I think yes. I mean, he said the other day that it's like, the door's been opened on an absolutely magical Aladdin's cave to play with, but in a serious way, which is to make their own mark and to add and contribute to the collection, but to ensure. He always says, he's been handed this successful, loved, popular place that survived thanks entirely to his parents. And in a sense, that makes them the luckiest couple in the world because they get to, move on with it.
And in a way, you've got a double legacy there, haven't you, really? Because you could have done nothing with the whole legacy, in which case he wouldn't have felt any qualms about turning his back on it, probably, because you and your late husband have invested so much time and effort and energy into it.
No, that's true. And my husband could have sold it and we could have got a grand flat in London or something, but he wouldn't have been happy. I once remember somebody saying to him, why didn't you just get rid of all this worry? Because it was a worry then, became a pleasure later. And he said, well, I didn't want to be the one to give it up.
Because the easy option would have been, at some point, you could have said to the National Trust, for example, oh, have it, do what you want with it, kind of thing. You wouldn't have had any conscience then, would you? You wouldn't have had any guilt about giving it, not, taking it away from people, as it were.
No, but still have been open. But he was absolutely adamant he wanted to keep it independent. That was what he fought for.
And in the end, he's very clever, and I think he felt it was his legacy for Chatsworth. He created a sort of separate national trust, the Chatsworth House Trust, which is a charity, which now runs it for the benefit of visitors. So all the income from visitors has to go to the charity. It doesn't go into the Duke's pocket. It can only be spent on improving Chatsworth. So there's that. I think he really felt, having inherited in 1950 with so many tax problems, 80% taxes on everything, that the most important thing was that he should hand it on to the next generation without that fear and that burden.
The trust enables that to happen.
And the trust enables that to happen.
Which is probably why the chocolate cake is so expensive.
The chocolate cake is so expensive. I'm very sorry about that. But the thing is that it was
You're
just
not, are you, Your Grace? I can tell.
No. We'll put it up to double. When
Just for me.
By tonight, yeah.
So kind of you. So come on, talking about this exhibition then, and it sounds like a wonderful opportunity to celebrate the life of the late
you sort
Duke
of get
as well.
to know him in a funny way through it.
I can imagine that.
Before. But of course what you don't find is the funniness, the quickness in conversation, and his brilliant mind. He was always 10 steps ahead of everybody else. And you could see him sitting next to some meal or something to some boring person, but he used to pretend, he used to have a wonderful act. He made them feel that they were the most important person in the world.
Fantastic. It's
He
incredible.
was very good at that.
Who
Brilliant.
Who chose what goes into the exhibition. Did you personally choose?
Well, me and our secretary, who's been with him for years, who knew him probably better than anybody except me, and we did it together. But she's done a fantastic job.
Were there any
Helen Marchant?
Were there any articles or artifacts in there, or items or pictures or anything that you just thought a bit too personal? Didn't want them to go in, or?
No, I don't think so. I think the more personal, the better in a show like that.
Mm. And how long have people got to come and see this exhibition?
Till Christmas.
Oh, so it's quite a good opportunity.
Every
then.
day till Christmas, and then again next year.
Fantastic! It sounds. I must admit, it's one that I certainly won't be missing. I'll be popping
you
up to
must
see
come
it.
and look.
I'll bring my own chocolate cake if that's okay.
You do.
But as long
just
as
don't smear the chocolate on the exhibits.
If I get caught eating it, I'll say no. The Duchess said it was okay. Because they'll have to go and find you now.
There's no such a thing as a free chocolate cake.
It's absolutely wonderful to meet you. You've been a delightful guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Do you get across to America before you go? Do you get to America these days very often?
Been fairly lately, but I'd rather doubt if I go. I'm very old.
You're not, are you, though? I mean, happy birthday for Friday.
Oh, thank you.
All the best people have their birthdays in March.
I believe there's another one coming up, isn't there?
I've said too much already. Your Grace, it's a delight to meet you. Thank you very much. And Simon, thank you. Good luck with the exhibition as well. I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much.